meeting. This is the SCTCA Countywide Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and let's do introductions. My name is Edie Takata. I'm from the city of Roanoke Park, and I chair the committee. Go to
Dana Trey at CTCA.
Stephen Hunter, Sonoma County SPI.
Elizabeth Tyrese, Sonoma County Regional Parks.
Giovanna Quezada Montano, SPI.
Eris Weaver, Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition.
Adam Garcia, SCTCA.
Andrew Peters, Town of Windsor Public Works.
Tarina Wilson, City of Santa Rosa.
Steph Britt, SCTCA.
Ross Clinton, SCTCA.
And joining us remotely, looks like we have at least one person.
Would you like me to read them off?
Yes, if you can read the roster.
Online, looks like we have Kurt Bates, City of Healdsburg, Lorian Rocchioli, Natalie McCarville, Reiner Kravis, also a Steer, Stephanie Home, and then Stephen Schmitz, as you see.
Thank you very much. Okay, item number 2, administrative items, receipt and approval of meeting notes, and this requires an action. Do we have enough staff? Do we have enough for a vote?
You asking about a quorum?
Yes,
Not sure what it normally
Or
is.
one.
yeah,
3.
county,
You have 5.
and we need 7,
Something.
6.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anything we're voting on?
Just a minute.
just the minutes, this requires an action. So can we table this then if we don't have a quorum to vote? Let's table it then. Would we be doing that at this point?
Yes, you would just need to ask the committee if they're okay with holding a committee of the whole.
Ah,
And that would just mean that
that we would
no
push this
action will be
forward.
taken, but we'd continue to discuss.
Does that committee of the whole need a vote? No, because we don't have enough.
I
for a
think
vote.
that the people in the room just need to agree to hold the committee of the whole.
Okay, so I am advised by staff that since we do not have a quorum for this meeting, we do have you gathered here, and if you agree to meet as a committee of the whole, we will not take any actions again because we don't have a quorum. But otherwise, we won't have a meeting because we wouldn't be meeting without the quorum. So do we have concurrence to meet as a committee of the whole? We have several presentations of folks coming from elsewhere too. So we will have those. We will not be taking any action. Can I have a show of hands for concurrence from to meet as a committee of the whole? Okay, thank you. So I think we got it from the voting members. Thank you very much. So that's what we will be doing. Number 2, administrative items. We will take that up later when we have a quorum for a meeting. Let's go to item number 3, public comments on items not on the regular agenda. Do we have any public comments? Never the public. And do we take public comments from the gallery, from the remote gallery? Yeah.
You can't, we ask that attendees online raise their hand if they'd like to submit public comment during the period,
Okay.
which I do not see any currently.
Thank you. Okay, well, that moves us on to item number 4, regional planning, and we have 3 items. And I want to let the committee know that items 4.2 and 4.3 will be switched as we need to give the presenter some time to get to be able to present. So can we start with 4.1, strategic transportation demand management? And this is which of the staff, or is this?
Here.
Oh, Steer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can give just a brief introduction to our consultants that are online. Joining us online, Natalie McCobble from Steer. And I think that many of you have seen this presentation in other committees already. Maybe if we could see a show of hands on anybody who hasn't, because I think most of you have attended the TAC. Okay, there's at least a couple of people. Great, and there may be some people online as well. So we've been working with Steer since December on developing a strategic transportation demand management plan. And the intention of this is to guide our work and as well as funding for the Go Sonoma Act First Last Mile Commuter Benefit Program for transportation demand management programs. We are gathering feedback from all of our committees this month, and we'll be bringing a final plan to our board next month. And with that, I will turn it over to Natalie.
Thank you, Dana. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie McCarville. As Dana mentioned, we're here today to present on our project process and outcomes, and then receive any comments or questions that you may have. I'll start by providing a brief overview of the project, including the key deliverables and timeline, as well as our approach to developing the strategic TDM plan, and then next steps for the project team as we work to finalize it over the next month here. So what is TDM? TDM stands for Transportation Demand Management, which really refers to coordinated strategies that aimed at changing travel behaviors. And we do this by increasing the attractiveness of various non-drive alone options, thus contributing to lower rates of vehicular travel. And common goals of TDM include reducing traffic congestion, improving travel efficiency, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and improving air quality, and then promoting equity and access to transportation options. So why is TDM important in Sonoma County? We recognize that there's already a good deal of TDM happening in Sonoma County today, but we also recognize that there's challenges that we do still want to address and opportunities that we want to capitalize on. So on the left-hand side, a few key challenges that are present today include convenience culture, and what we mean by that is related to the high rates of vehicle ownership that we're seeing and drive-alone rates. Transit service limitations, so current service predominantly focuses on the 8 to 5 commute schedule along the main north-south corridor, and this limits access for shift workers, students with evening classes, and residents in less populated areas. So from a TDM perspective, we're trying to think about different options that can help address those needs. And then equity gaps, so residents who are transit dependent and live outside the main urbanized areas face limited mobility options, particularly in the eastern and western parts of the county. That said, there are also opportunities that can really help set the stage for continued success in TDM implementation, and that includes the fact that the majority of trips are under 5 miles, so 60% under 5 miles, and this is ideal for first last mile solutions, for biking and walking for those shorter trips where the infrastructure is available. And particularly with regard to biking and walking, the favorable climate and geography in Sonoma County helps make this more attractive. And then as the urban context evolves, there's also the opportunity for land use policies and parking policies to support travel behavior change, particularly related to things such as TOD and parking management. So the strategic TDM plan seeks to bolster both existing and new TDM efforts by defining recommendations for primarily non-infrastructure strategies to reduce SOV travel and GHG emissions. And so to meet that objective, we had 4 key phases as we were developing the strategic TDM plan. And so this included conducting existing conditions review and stakeholder engagement, defining desired TDM strategy outcomes, evaluating a range of potential strategies to see what would be suitable for Sonoma County, and then finally developing an implementation roadmap that consists of recommendations for SETCA to help focus efforts and support local agencies in TDM implementation. So on the next few slides, I'll just share a few key highlights of our project process. So we started by conducting a review of TDM-related plans, studies, and policies, as well as current services and programming to establish a baseline understanding of the landscape in the county today. So key things that we looked at included mode share, a review of key travel origins and destinations, and then trip lengths as well. And so really from a TDM planning perspective, the exciting thing here is the fact that 90% of trips are within Sonoma County, so they begin and end within the county, which gives us a lot of potential to influence travel options, both at the origin and destination of where trips are going to and from. And then in terms of mobility needs and gap areas, our review identified the need for non-drive alone travel options for east-west connections across the county, as well as north-south trips that are currently not available on SMART. And then for those shorter trips, there's a need for expanded shared micromobility options, such as bike share, within city centers and other areas where the infrastructure is able to support that. And then as we're thinking about bridging those mobility gaps, there is a need to create awareness through marketing and promotion to help make that behavior shift possible. So really thinking about how we can tie TDM marketing efforts with sort of capital projects that are coming online or other services that are coming up and available. The second key piece to our first phase of work was stakeholder engagement. So this consisted of convening a project partnership committee, which was really instrumental in helping shape the plan. In March, we'd hosted 2 focus group discussions, and we'd also put out a public survey to gather targeted feedback and insights regarding priorities and the types of incentives that would encourage folks to use non-drive alone for both short and longer trips. And then, of course, our discussion with you today and the feedback we received will be used to further refine the plan and staff priorities. So on this slide, I've put together a few key themes that emerged from our public engagement. So just to highlight a few of the things that we heard include transit system complexity and lack of clear information. So what we heard was that even regular users of transit sometimes have difficulty understanding the transit system due to complicated maps or unclear routes. And so really a need for clear, simple information, as well as multilingual information so that there are no language barriers for people who may not be proficient in English. Some comments related to transit frequency and reliability. So going back to the need for extended options when transit is not available. So thinking about evening and weekend service options. And then some comments around behavioral barriers and public perception. So this was really interesting, a piece of feedback that we heard where, you know, even the public perception of transit as being slow, unreliable, or difficult to use, that perception itself discourages ridership, even when transit could be a viable option. And then some comments around the lack of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in some areas. So while there are areas with expanded bike lanes, other areas do remain car focused, and this creates inconsistencies in safety and accessibility. In terms of the priorities and opportunities for TDM, key priorities included things such as better coordination between transportation services, reduced traffic congestion, and reduced emissions. And then really when looking about the types of incentives that folks would find most useful in terms of changing their behavior, things such as universal transit passes were highlighted, on-demand shuttles as first last mile solutions, better real-time transit information for folks to plan their trips, and then secure bike parking for those shorter trips. And once we had the results from the public engagement, we were able to confirm our desired TDM strategy outcomes. So on this slide, you can see the outcomes that we had defined. So on the left-hand side is the outcomes related to essentially strategic fit or the potential impact that the strategies could have. So we looked at whether these would be strategies that would increase awareness and allow people to utilize a variety of multimodal travel options, strategies that reduce GHG emissions, vehicle dependency, and improve access to key destinations, and then whether these are strategies that enhance access to transportation and mobility options, especially for vulnerable communities and populations. And at the same time, we wanted to make sure that the strategies we are recommending are feasible to implement. So we looked at whether these are solutions that can build upon programming as well as viable to implement or at least initiate within the next 5 years, and then the relative cost of implementing the strategies. So our evaluation process in determining which strategies would be most suitable consisted of a mixed methods approach. And so we began by compiling a long list of about 75 potential TDM strategies. And then we whittled that down to ultimately 27 strategies after grouping them to boost impact and create synergies where it made sense. So 27 strategies were assessed against the desired TDM strategy outcomes you'd seen on the previous slide. And this ultimately resulted in a prioritized list of 20 strategies. On this slide, we have an illustration of how the prioritized list of strategies are discussed in the strategic TDM plan, and that's really through two key components. The first is a TDM strategy inventory that constitutes concise guidance on the prioritized strategies. And this is really a resource for any TDM stakeholder in Sonoma County to reference. We recognize that successful and sustained travel behavior change will rely on many entities playing a part in TDM implementation. And so this is really a helpful resource and starting point for them to reference. And then the second component is the implementation plan, and that includes recommendations that will serve as a guide for SCTCA in advancing countywide TDM efforts. So in terms of the implementation plan and the recommendations, the plan includes a total of 15 recommendations that are organized into near-term, mid-term, and long-term. And so with that categorization, we're really looking at when these actions or when these recommendations could be initiated. We expect that they would actually flow into subsequent planning horizon, but really looking at when these can be started, when we can start to advance efforts on these actions. So those that can be initiated within the next year include raising awareness for the strategic TDM plan. So here we want to ensure that we're securing buy-in from potential partners, aligning local priorities, and streamlining implementation efforts. So here we look at things such as presentations of the plan to potential stakeholders and partners such as chambers of commerce or other key and specific industry groups. We'd look to develop a targeted TDM marketing strategy. So this would include making updates to the Go Sonoma website to enhance the visibility of available services and programming, and then the development of an annual TDM marketing plan. And this would really lay out efforts on how programs would be marketed, what are the specific outreach processes that we want to be engaging folks in. We'd also look to support and promote existing regional technical resources for developing local TDM supportive land use and parking policy. So here, looking at coordinating with local municipalities to identify barriers and opportunities to the adoption of such policies, providing technical assistance resources, and then down the road, really thinking about how to also support municipalities from a staff technical assistance perspective. Similarly, for efforts related to site-based as well as municipal parking pricing, there's a lot of helpful resources available through MTC, so we look to promote those resources, but really with a focus on highlighting best practices and case studies that are relevant for the Sonoma County context. One thing that we heard very clearly during the public engagement process for this plan was the importance and the impact that transit subsidies have on enabling folks to use transit. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is coordinating with local partner agencies to promote and broaden where appropriate financial incentives for transit. So this would include promotion of the Clipper Start program, and then targeted outreach to large employers on the Clipper Bay Pass program as well. And then really to help address some of the first last mile gaps that we're seeing, we look to collaborate with partners to define context-specific priorities for shuttle service expansion, partnerships with transportation network companies and micromobility, really looking to identify these public-private partnerships, and then in the longer term, executing the implementation of services. Related to the emergency ride home program, so that will continue to be a key support program that helps remove the fear of being stranded. So this is a common barrier to using shared and active modes, and so we want to take a look back at the emergency ride home program to ensure that the process is very user-friendly, and so we look to make updates there as needed. And then finally, for the last near-term action here, we look to develop a TDM funding plan and program for the near and midterm actions. So working closely with stakeholders to establish a list of resourcing needs and the preliminary cost estimates for these needs, and then defining the eligibility criteria for the funds, with then looking to ultimately solicit applications from partners for this funding plan. And then in terms of the midterm recommendations, so those that would be initiated in the next 2 to 3 years, here we're really looking at capacity building. So thinking about ways that we can support community-based organizations in implementing TDM strategies. So here, SCTCA could help connect potential partners for grant applications, particularly where there's an opportunity for a CBO to partner with a public agency. SCTCA could also provide additional support, such as pre-application support to help scope viable projects. And this would really help build that TDM capacity across the county. We'd also look to establish a countywide TDM roundtable or a similar forum. So this would be a TDM-focused practitioner group, and this would help build regional alignment, strengthen partnerships, and support more effective implementation of the strategies across the county. We'd also look to support the expansion of employer-based commute programs. So here, looking to coordinate with chambers of commerce to increase awareness of free TDM support that is available, particularly for smaller businesses who may not have the resources or expertise, promoting SMART employer shuttle service program, and also the development of sort of stock promotional materials so that employers can easily share information with their employees. And then finally, we look to establish TDM data standards. So we recognize that TDM will continue to be implemented in different places by different entities, but we want to standardize data practices so that we can support accurate performance tracking and really help strengthen the case for future funding and program expansion down the road. And then finally, for the longer term actions, so those to be initiated in the next 4 to 5 years, we'd look to design and brand a countywide TDM recognition program. So as TDM evolves and advances in the years to come, we'd want to implement a structured initiative to acknowledge and celebrate employers, CBOs, schools, and other organizations that demonstrate a leadership role and commitment to promoting sustainable commuting options. And this can really help maintain momentum by offering public recognition and positive branding opportunities. And then finally, recognizing that travel behavior, technology, regional growth patterns, and community needs are constantly evolving, we look to update the plan in the next 4 to 5 years to ensure that it's reflecting current needs and opportunities. And so that summarizes our project process and outcomes. And so on this slide, we just have a summary of the different committees that we've been presenting to in lead up to going to the board on June 9th. I would like to open it up for any comments or questions that you have for me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, from the committee, any comments? This is the discussion section. Any feedback? I do note staff, we needed to have feedback by May 27th, which is today. Does that mean 5 o'clock or now?
Yeah, now would be great, but by tomorrow morning would be reasonable as well.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, this is the last committee that this is going to.
Okay.
The
So
tight timeline before going to our board.
that's right, because you need to get to the board. So if anyone has any comments right now from the committee, or you can send it on over to Dana, who'll help to include it in whatever needs to be done prior to going to the board. It looks like Elizabeth.
Yeah, a question or a minor comment. I love all the high level planning and the long-term planning and the larger and longer term vision. One of the questions after reflecting on the presentation from the TAC meeting is where are the opportunities for minor tweaks, if you will, in systems so they're connecting better and meeting timelines for users better? My example is I walk to the SMART train and there's a Petaluma bus waiting for people to get off the southbound train. But that bus leaves right when the southbound train is leaving, and the intent of that bus is to take people to Kaiser from the SMART train. And it's, I think, half hour before the next bus. So those types of conversations, having a platform for that and where minor tweaks in the system could be made. We've done that with our roads and lights, like when people on a bike come to a traffic signal, and if that traffic signal isn't picking up your bike, we have a place to make a comment about that. And so trying to find a place where these minor adjustments or conversations about those would occur.
That's an interesting idea to have a place to, like, a central place to make comments about transit connections, because you're right, that doesn't exactly exist in the way that you know, some of jurisdictions have platforms for roadway and bicycle pedestrian kind of improvement. So yeah, that's definitely something that is probably good to look into in our transit integration work. In terms of a kind of forum for that, we do have a monthly transit technical advisory committee meeting, and a lot of these things like connections are discussed there. You know, that there's, you know, with the smart train connections, there's often a trade-off that needs to be made because of the limited amount of service that is available and funding available for the service. So they do sometimes have to prioritize inbound or outbound connection. But that is, yeah, I like that idea of having some sort of location, central location where people can go and submit feedback on connections.
Cool. Open up to public comment, of those present, and then we'll go to the gallery. Eris.
Whoops. You could probably hear me just fine. So I have a couple comments and one that's sort of a question comment smushed together. In terms of looking at the evaluation of what were the higher impact strategies, I guess my question in terms of the methodology is, was this just based on what the public comments were, or was there also a look at research? Because I know people are notoriously bad at knowing what actually will change their own behavior. Oh yeah, if this happened, I would do it. But it doesn't, but we have data out there, right? There's research about what kinds of things actually change behavior. So that's sort of a question, did that get calculated into all of this? For example, I noticed one of those in there was fares, you know, for public transit, and at least the research that I've seen indicates that headways and routes make more of a difference in people choosing to take transit than whether you give it to them for free. I mean, obviously, in some cases with SMART, the giving the youth and seniors free fares has boosted that population, but for in a lot of other cases, that's, you know, people say, oh, I don't take the bus because it's too expensive, but it's actually cheaper than driving. So what people say and then what they do don't always match. I had a couple of other comments on, you know, just the list here of the different interventions and plans, and so much of it to me is vague in terms of I don't even know what it means, and so it's hard to know if it's going to actually do anything. I mean, of all the things listed on here, the ones that seem the most relevant to changing behavior is getting rid of free parking. Right, you can give people incentives to take the bus to work, but if the buses don't go at the right time and you got free parking, people are going to still drive, right? So any of the research that I know about behavior change in the big thing is you have to have both carrots and sticks, multiple interventions. And so getting rid of free parking would be the big biggest stick that we have. I think people complain, but it does change behavior. The other thought that I have is you do mention the emergency ride home program, and I tell people about it all the time, but I don't know anyone who's actually used it because it's hard to find it if you don't know where it is already. And the procedure for actually getting the reimbursement is horrendous. So it sucks. The program sucks. Nobody uses it. It's not promoted, and it doesn't work very well when you try to do it. Because I actually considered doing it. And when I looked at everything I would have to do to get the money back, it's like, well, screw it. I'll just pay it, pay the Uber or whatever and not even bother because it's so much work. So that's a missed opportunity, right? If people are going to use it, it has to be easy to use. Same thing with any of these other things, whether it's incentives or shuttles or all of that, if they're not intuitive and easy to use, they're not going to change behavior. I think that was it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent feedback, especially regarding ARH. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and if I could just respond to your question. Yeah, I'll just tag on an emergency ride home piece briefly, and then I'll start answering your question, and Natalie may jump in as well. But yeah, for the emergency ride home program, the recommendation is to look at opportunities for streamlining and improving the program, and then including it in the marketing plan as well. So that is definitely recognize the challenges with it as it exists. Your question about how we evaluated the strategies, we did use a combination of research-based data on impact, as well as, we had, I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, maybe 8 different criteria we were looking at. And one of them was the public input that we got through this process. So we did take into a lot of other factors. And I think, Natalie, maybe you want to chime in on the kind of what we used as a standard for the level of impact on the strategies.
Yes, thank you, Dana. So we did look at CAPCOA, which is kind of an industry standard for looking at relative BMT impact potential and greenhouse gas emissions potential. We also did look at the Sonoma County BMT reduction calculator or tool that's available. So those are, that has been adapted for the Sonoma County context when we looked at the relative impact potential for the different strategies. But as Dana mentioned, we did balance that with a range of other criteria related to, how feasible is this to implement within the next 5 years or initiate implementation? What was the public feedback that we received? And then, is this an opportunity where a strategy can create additional awareness through like marketing or that sort of thing? So we also recognize that, within the scope of the strategic TDM plan, we maybe wouldn't necessarily have influence directly over things such as transit schedules or frequencies. So that was sort of a, I guess, limitation in the sense of like what we are able to achieve through a TDM perspective. But we recognize that there's other parallel efforts ongoing related to that. And so what we would want to do from a TDM perspective is to make sure that that's very visible and that's marketed. And so really focusing our efforts on creating an annual TDM plan to understand, okay, what are ongoing efforts that we want to really highlight on our website or through engagement with employers or through engagement with chambers of commerce. So really kind of coming at it from a different angle, if you will.
Okay. Any public comments from the gallery?
Do not see any.
Okay.
Online.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you very much. The 27th is today, so if anyone has any additional comments, please send them to Dana and then they can get considered and incorporated. Thanks. Okay, it looks like for item, I'm gonna move on to item 4.2. I think we're able to do that. We had talked a little bit about switching, but I think we can, it sounds like TPPR, we are ready for that. And staff, is there any introduction to this?
Yeah, so some of you may have seen this before. This is a transportation priority policy for roadways. This is a presentation by
Move the
MTC.
microphone a little closer to your mouth, please.
I will repeat myself. Sorry about that. This is a transportation by MTC for the transportation priority policy for roadways. And they're going to discuss some of the proposed changes for the complete streets checklist. And in the agenda, we also have a comment sheet where you can add your comments. And without further ado, passing it on.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Mika Miyasato. I'm with, actually with AC Transit. I'm representing transit agency on the Regional Transit Priority Program. Today, I have Stephanie on in attendance. So, and this program, the Transit Priority Policy, I'm working very closely with MTC's Regional Network Management Team. Britt Tanner and Joel Schaefer, they could not be here today as they're attending conference. So with that, I'll kick off my presentation. As Steph introduced, this presentation was provided to SCTA's Technical Advisory Committee and also Planning Advisory Committee. So this presentation may be familiar to some of you. And this is a quick introduction of what the menu of the MTC's regional transit priority efforts. And the two on the left, those are established initiatives, Transit Performance Initiative, TPI. This program aims at getting buses transit out of traffic and move people faster. And also the Forward Initiative deliver transit priority improvements mainly on the bridge corridor. And the three on the right, those are relatively new tools. And today I'm talking about this yellow box, a transit priority policy for roadways. And then there are two other programs, Accelerated Infrastructure Delivery or BUS 8. It is a funding program focused on hotspots, quick build projects. And then lastly, Innovative Deployment to Enhance Arterials IDEA program. It is a technical assistance program. And why transit priority? When we talk about transit priority work, we are referring to both policies and roadway infrastructure improvements that can help transit riders get where they want to go more quickly. There are many different tools in the toolbox that can be considered transit priority, but it can range from, as you can see, the transit lanes. It could be signal timing adjustments to move buses faster and more reliably. It could be stop design regulations around bus stops. It could be signage helping buses to load people faster, better, and more efficiently. So this is all about, moving people where they need to go quickly. In addition, that another things that the transit priority helps is transit speed. On average, Bay Area Transit has slowed by 5% since 2016. That means it costs 5% more to operate the same amount of service. So implementing transit priority will make transit more attractive, make cheaper to operate. So AC Transit observed about 10% travel time improvements on the transit signal priority project. And on the larger transit priority corridor project, SFMT observed up to 30% travel time improvements. As you may know, MTC has Plan Bay Area 2050, which provides a high-level transportation vision for the region. And more recently, during the pandemic, Transit Transformation Action Plan was adapted to help transit recover post-pandemic. The action plan lists a near-term action plans, including development of the transit priority policy. So today I'm here to present the transit priority policy for roadways, short for TPPR. The purpose of this policy is to enhance the transit rider experience by supporting implementation of transit priority infrastructure. Ultimately, the goals are to improve transit travel time and reliability. And here is a key TPPR contents in one page. So where policy applies, it applies to all roadways in the 9-county Bay Area with scheduled fixed route transit service. That includes both surface streets and access controlled highways. And we're also including the concept of transit priority network. So this will be mentioned in the policy, but it will be actually developed in the regional transit assessment. So this transit priority network will inform regional funding priorities. And this will, and there is a slide to discuss further on this transit priority network. Also, as Steph mentioned, that we want to encourage interagency coordination. And this will be documented through complete street checklist so the complete street checklist will be updated to ensure stronger coordination between local right-of-way agencies like cities and counties and transit agencies. And then lastly, the policy would encourage sub-regional jurisdiction to adopt local resolution to support transit priority. So as I discussed, as I mentioned in the previous slide, policy would introduce a concept of transit priority network. So that this orange street are where the transit operates, and actually blue too. Orange and blue streets are where transit operates. Now, it's not on every street. There's a selective streets where typically transit operates. And transit priority network, showing us that this is kind of hypothetical roadway network shown on the blue. This is where typically the higher ridership and the frequent services exist. And we'll work with the stakeholder agencies in developing this transit priority network. And as I mentioned, that this will be developed through regional transit assessment, as this would require a discussion with stakeholder agency as well as data collection. So as this group is, BPAC, everybody is probably familiar with the complete street checklist. So that we are proposing to use the existing complete street checklist, and the left side half is the kind of reminder of what is included in existing complete streets. So this applies to projects seeking more than $250,000 in regional discretionary funding. And this applies to projects on active transportation network. That's an existing complete street policy. What we are proposing as the new changes is transit priority review. And that's on the orange and blue circles overlaid on this green circle. So the proposal is that projects along transit routes need transit agency review for impacts to transit service. And then on the subset, if the project is on the transit priority network, the project applicant should follow best practice transit supportive design principles. So this is asking consideration for transit priority on those selected streets where the transit priority, where the projects are on transit priority network. So policy would recommend the projects on the TPN to be informed by best practice transit support design principles. It is not one specific design guidelines. If you want to take a look, what could be a potential menu, the NACTO does have transit street design guides, and also there may be local guidelines. AC Transit has transit support design guidelines. So as some agency may have bus stop guidelines or may have a preferred design guides that they have been using. And here's a graphic example of how the all ages and ability and transit supportive design principles are applied on the same project. one on the left, this is 7th Street at Howard Street in San Francisco. There is class 2 bike lanes and there is a curbside bus stop. And buses had to cross bike lanes twice to, bus had to cross to the curbside for a passenger pickup and then cross bike lanes again, so crossing twice. So this was not efficient for transit operations, and it was not ideal for the bicyclist comfort level. When you apply the all agents ability and transit supportive design principles, you could separate the bike lanes and the bus lanes for better operational efficiency for transit and increased comfort and safety for bikes. And here is another example from a suburban context. This is Walnut Avenue in Fremont. Again, the buses merged into bike lanes at bus stop, forcing bikes into traffic lanes. And then on your right, bus bulb and sidewalk level bike lane, eliminate conflict points. So these are not cheap examples, but just showing the illustrative examples as showing how the two concepts could be applied. And I did mention earlier that there would be policy would encourage local resolution on transit priority. So to promote, the one things we heard is that there should be incentives for local agencies to adopt this transit priority. So if the local agency is interested in adopting transit priority policy, then this could increase likelihood of receiving MTC discretionary funding. In terms of format, it could take a change updating the local complete street resolution that you may already have, or you could adopt own local transit priority policy, or it could be local resolution supporting a transit priority policy. There are a couple examples listed here. So even the ones that they have today, it's taking a different way of adapting. It could be part of a general plan that's supporting transit priority. So we did talk about the policy expectation by agency type. As I mentioned earlier, the local jurisdiction applying for the discretionary funding, they would need to coordinate with a transit agency and then have them review project applications. This is just for their consideration. And again, the transit operator, they would need to review those projects and respond back to local jurisdiction within 30 days. This is just to show you that in the winter 2025, February and March timeframe, we have shared initial draft policy memo with various working groups and have incorporated their feedback so that this presentation and policy memo that you may have seen incorporates the feedback from these groups. And now that we are going through the outreach in the 9-county Bay Area, and this is one of the 3 meetings we're holding within Sonoma County. So where we are now, we are here in the draft, we are here in the process of developing a draft policy with the feedback we received from county transportation agency staff and committees. We'll consider the feedback and develop draft policy and present a draft policy to regional network management bodies in summer and fall of 2025 with the intention of adoption by the end of 2025. In parallel, we are starting to, we're in the process of procuring regional transit assessment consultant service, and we're planning on kicking off middle of 2025. And you'll see that, we need to do a data collection before we can develop a transit priority network development. So the transit priority network development will start later this year and with the intention of adoption by end of 2026. So I just want to give you a note that there is a gap between the adoption of final policy and then adoption of transit priority network. So in the interim period that the complete street transit review portion, we'll be only asking the project applicant to consider, notify transit agencies and have the transit agency to review. The portion of the TPN would not apply till the adoption of the TPN at the end of 2026. So I'm not going to read through this discussion questions, but this could be helpful while you're reviewing a policy memo. And we are requesting feedback on the revised draft policy memo by close of business Friday, June 6th. And you can reach out to us, with all three of us, via email at transitpriority@bayareametro.gov. And that concludes my presentation. And with that, I can open up for questions and comments.
Okay, thank you. From the committee, any questions or comments?
Yes, I could give comments. All of my comments I've given at other meetings. One of the first concerns that I had was on roadways, specifically arterials, where we have transit service that is important, but we also have extremely limited right-of-way. I was worried that there would be conflict between public transit improvements and bike ped improvements. It seems like with the edits that have been made, that's not as big of a concern, because if we have a conversation with our transit providers and they say, no problem, if you need to prioritize bike ped in this location, that's also obviously important to them. So there's more coordination. So I appreciate that. And then I also appreciate the change that was made where we could adopt an update to an adopted complete streets policy instead of having to have a standalone transit priority policy go through council, because those, again, at some points would argue with one another potentially. So that's at least what the city of Santa Rosa plans to do. The only other thing that I still have a concern about is we are limited in what types of guidance we can use as a jurisdiction. So the changes that we make in our roadways largely have to follow adopted standards at this point. So the MUTCDs or something else like our city standards that is a full adopted standard. And things like guidelines, while I personally agree with a lot of the things that are in them, when we are in litigation, we are not successful if we implement a project that's designed based on a guidance versus a standard. And so that at this point is an issue for us. So I'm hoping that some of the guidelines that NACTO has adopted can start to be adopted into the MUTCD. That would be, I know that's above all of our heads, but that would be great and very helpful for us. But those are comments that I've given before. So that's just repeating for if anyone hasn't heard those from us.
Thank you. Okay, anything from members of the public present? And how about the gallery?
I don't see anything online currently.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And so please do note, close business Friday, June 6th. You have 3 folks in your packet to contact. If you have further comments, Friday, June 6th. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the next item, 4.3 Vision Zero Dashboard Updates. We're having a presentation from
me, Adam Garcia. Good afternoon, everyone. As many of you know, we have great work in our Vision Zero aspirations and kind of where we're going with our Safe Streets and Roads for All grant to try to enhance our Vision Zero dashboard. Currently, what we have right now is just reporting on crashes. So what we want to be able to do is actually bring what a lot of the action plans that we have within, I'm sorry, a lot of the actions within the Vision Zero action plan to more of a countywide standard for reporting. So to give you some examples, one of the things we're thinking about are trying to just keep up to date when there's new bicycle facilities made. How can we make sure that there's a current and active map online for all of our existing bicycle facilities? Others kind of related to health could be related to just making our roads safer in various ways. So where I'm hoping to share with you right now is just a quick overview of what we're trying to achieve. Let's see, bringing this up. So one of the ways that we're trying to do this is be able to centralize a lot of this data. So the county currently has something that they're developing that's essentially a GIS kind of one-stop shop where you can go for health data, for other related data to kind of find all of your GIS information, essentially, mapping data and other health related information. So we're hoping to bring the same kind of centralized effort with our Vision Zero data. So this is looking at bringing a new Vision Zero hub online. And within that, there's something within our Vision Zero action plan called progress metrics. And so we'll have a chance to review those in just a second, but essentially figuring out how can we make sure that we engage with our the various actors who are kind of holding the data around many of these progress metrics, and then be able to annually report on that and have a platform that would be made publicly accessible. So looking at kind of what we have right now, the dashed lines are essentially what we're planning to create. The solid lines are what we have right now. So I mentioned kind of like our crash dashboard. You can go online and look at any history of where the crashes have been across the county. We have a story map that's related and a Vision Zero action toolkit. So to try to centralize a lot of that, we want to be able to have all of this information in essentially a Vision Zero hub. And through the support of County ISD and GIS, we're bringing a lot of this data together under one kind of roof, essentially. The heart of this effort right now is really figuring out the progress metrics tracker. I'm just going to actually jump down real quick to give you a sense of what our progress metrics are. So the main categories are create safer speeds, eliminate impaired driving, create a culture of safety, build and maintain safe streets for all, make vehicles safer and reduce private vehicle use, and then improve data for effective decision making. So within each of those, underneath, you see kind of the list of them, those progress metrics. So where we want to go is just create something at first that's kind of a proof of concept. So we'll create this progress metrics survey. Sorry, there's getting my terms confused. So creating the progress metrics tracker would then, to be able to extract that information, essentially there'd be a survey that we could send out to be able to capture that information and then have this online platform be able to report on those different metrics kind of in real time. So as a project is updated or somebody updates some information on a progress metric, then that would be reflected in the tracker. Once we have kind of this tracker, we'd also want to be able to create what would be kind of like a PDF report export. So on an annual basis, you can go and essentially export all the information based off your jurisdiction for what data we have in the progress metrics tracker. So here's kind of a look at how this would work. Essentially figuring out kind of what data we want to be able to extract, and then make that available on the website. So our first attempt is really trying to look at eliminate impaired driving, a few of the progress metrics in there, and then one for create culture of safety, and then a big one being kind of what I was mentioning around maintaining an inventory of the current existing bicycle network, as well as the pedestrian improvements. So the ones on the left, under eliminate impaired driving and create a culture of safety, those are all primarily under the auspices of county health. So we've met with them and are kind of building our inventory of what data they have related to this. So enforcement of responsible beverage service, understanding how DUIs are impacting our roadways in addition to crashes from DUIs, enrollment in diversion programs for DUI, and then enrollment in drug and alcohol treatment programs. In create a culture of safety, there's a lot of work that is being done in terms of programs for anti-distraction and anti-drunk driving. And then where we look to the jurisdictions, largely based off the near finalized or finalized active transportation plans, would be an understanding of where all of those bicycle and pedestrian improvements are planned around the county. So these are the initial metrics that we're trying to be able to create. And the way that we would then kind of interact with the jurisdictions is essentially kind of a Vision Zero survey. So this is just a mock-up example for the ones that probably are most relevant to the folks in the room. So understanding kind of action 4.6 of the Vision Zero action plan, closing gaps in the bicycle and pedestrian networks and designing facilities for all ages and abilities. So the way that this would play out essentially would be you would receive this survey and it would be limited to kind of one person per jurisdiction. So they would be able to log into this survey, and this is through ArcGIS Survey 123. So this could be an interactive map on the right. So you could click on this and say, let's say, the Grant Street project in Healdsburg. Once that's completed, you could go and mark the status as finalized. If there's a subset of the project that was completed, you could specify that as the project extent. And there's also the option to even add a new project that might not already be existing in the adopted active transportation plan. So if there's a new bike path that was proposed that goes beyond what was in the adopted plan, we could add that as well. And then similarly for the proposed pedestrian facilities, this would include crossing improvements as well as sidewalk gap improvements. So you would be able to, click on the map or potentially select from a drop-down list in the facility name, update the status. And so the idea would be that once you update this information in the survey, that would automatically then feed back into this online map that would be shared at the county GIS level. So that could be used in a number of different formats, either on your own website. SCTCA has our own map that we would be keeping updated as well. And so the idea is to keep all of this information as live as possible once the data comes in. So let's see. And again, this is kind of the long list of what our eventual goal would be. This shows all of the progress metrics. But as I mentioned, we're trying to just do essentially a pilot just to test out a lot of the technology through GIS to make sure that this is possible. We've consulted extensively with County GIS who have used these tools in various in applications. So we're trying to bring a lot of kind of the best practices to head in just this in this one tool. So our hope is that come June, we'll kick this off. We do have a contractor we're working with, Fair and Peers, to be able to help support some of this work, as well as work closely with County GIS, as they're kind of really at the forefront a lot of this data management, data manipulation, data reporting. We've also met with county folks as well too, to kind of understand a lot of what their needs are, and we'll be reaching out to the rest of the jurisdictions just to kind of test this idea a little bit more, see what efforts you have already that might align, how we can essentially leverage this work to make your job a little bit easier. Especially if there's ongoing work where you're trying to do, say, Vision Zero reporting on an annual basis. This is something that we believe can help, a tool that we can deploy to make that a little bit easier. So, and the goal is to, I think, work on this over the next year and a half or so, essentially trying to get these main kind of pilot progress metrics deployed first to make sure that those run smoothly. And then once we have that, we can start looking at some of these other progress metrics. For instance, one of them, we already have data for evaluating hospital data from where there's crashes. So we know that there's a lot of data we have from some of these, but it's just essentially getting the wheels running first before we kind of start to deploy it for the rest of these progress metrics. So yeah, you can expect me to get in touch with you over the next month if you haven't heard from me already on this project, and we will, yeah, hope to get this lifted soon, and would welcome any comments and thoughts on how we can improve it either now or when we meet in the future. So with that, I will open it up for discussion.
Okay, anyone in the committee, something for Adam?
Yeah, it would be super helpful to be able to use a tool, especially built by somebody else, that we can use to track things. Because at this point, we're so understaffed that it's like our brains and emails and PowerPoints, and we don't have a formal way to track it. And we do end up relying on the dashboard quite a bit to see that information. So it would be really helpful. I have a question on your fifth page here. So Santa Rosa obviously did our ATP independent of the county process.
Right.
And so is the implication that we would give you our GIS data, you would incorporate that into your countywide GIS layers, and then anytime we finish something, this is what we would update, so that if there's a change in the network, something changes? Or are we going into this and inputting each facility one by one?
No, that's your earlier proposal is what we'd love to do. So once Petaluma, Windsor, Santa Rosa have their ATPs adopted, we'd love to get both the bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And it seems like they're mostly kind of tracking in terms of, you know, obviously the classes for bicycle facilities, sidewalk gaps, crossing improvements. I think all the data is fairly consistent that we should be able to then roll that into one single GIS file that they would have existing and proposed either line projects or point projects that we would be able to then, yeah, have this as then the essentially the authoritative source. That data would live on the county GIS website, kind of like we have a version right now. And so, yeah, anytime that there's a project, you could do it more often than annual if you want. Our just requirement would be that at least once a year we get an update. And the importance of that is then, I glossed over it a little bit, but this PDF export is something that we would love to get feedback on also. This is the idea that of the progress metrics, we would have kind of individual jurisdictional reports. So if you want to know what was built in Santa Rosa over the last year, as long as you've inputted your data into the survey, we could get that information or any of the other information that's kind of listed as one of the progress metrics. So some kind of nice PDF report, you can then share that with committees, councils, ideally, so then you don't have to worry so much about making your own kind of Vision Zero annual report. This could be something that you could rely on.
Yeah, that'd be great, because that's the only time we really sit down together and think about everything that we have done. And it's kind of interesting, this PDF export, because on top of a list of what you've completed, you could export maps of each jurisdiction. And then for people interested in leaving that jurisdiction, like how does a bike lane change as you get to maybe county lines? And that could maybe be helpful for the TDM work too, is like every jurisdiction could end up having a matching map so that like people could see where all of the facilities are. I think it's great.
This is exciting. I look forward to this tool being online and all the building of this tool. And this is fun to see in it. So you see each jurisdiction adding information regularly. And I appreciate this. Yes, the lists were great with the written descriptions, but actually seeing it as a map tool, it's easier for me to read the information and to make sense of it and to see the gaps. So I look forward to this.
Great. Yeah, we'll have to figure out how to exactly display that map. I know there's some options, if you just had the whole, county-wide map, it'd be hard to really pinpoint where everything is. There are some options for some other tools that kind of what you have on the screen is what you then export. So if you wanted to say zoom into a particular area, you could do that. Otherwise, if you just have the countywide, it's the countywide, and it'd be a little bit harder to interpret in the PDF. But once you go into the online tool, that's where you can actually essentially find more of the zoom in, get the detail.
Perfect.
Okay, public.
So I might be getting out of the realm of this committee's jurisdiction, so tell me if I am, but the things on the left side of the diagram, like the actions under eliminated impaired driving and the driving programs and stuff, I mean, it's clear to me how a map and where gaps have been closed, how that would work. And so I'm trying to visualize what is being counted in these other things and how is it being related to the other stuff.
Great question. So those each data point is going to be a little bit different. So yeah, if it's spatially based, we'll definitely include a map. For some of these others, it might be more tabular, so you would just get a table. And so we're still waiting to get some sample data from the county for this information, but it might be countywide or it might be by jurisdiction. So it largely depends on kind of the data source. Our real hope is just to try to make this least cumbersome as possible. So one of the things we're asking for the data providers is that, what's an existing reporting process you have already? If you can just, if we can just add on to that and say, can you send us that table when you report to somebody else? we can take that format and just know that every year we're gonna get the same format. We can have that then uploaded into the progress metrics tracker and then be able to massage it maybe to some degree in terms of formatting, obviously not change the data, but just make it more readable. So then we can say, yeah, here were the, number of enrollments in the DUI program, every year.
And how do we draw the line between this data and the actual number of crashes or deaths, which is ultimately the ultimate data point, right?
Yeah, we have that same challenge with a lot of our greenhouse gas reporting too. So yeah, these essentially kind of like are the indicators, right? And then the crashes are the metrics in some way. And there's some ways that we can look at, for instance, probably most tellingly, like spatially, we can say where was a protected bicycle project implemented, then go to the crash dashboard and look at 5 years before or 2 years after or something like that, to try to operationalize that and just make that a little bit more interesting, I think is something we can explore. So yeah, we should keep this idea alive and figure out how to be able to actually measure and say, what are we actually doing in terms of reducing the crashes overall and how to make those connections. So yes, I'm with you on that. We have to definitely brainstorm a little more though, but I like the idea a lot.
I will say those items on the left, I don't necessarily care like how the data is shown, but when Santa Rosa gives an update to our BPAB every year, on the action plan and our implementation plan, we have to always check in with the county and just ask that information. And if other jurisdictions are also doing that, I kind of feel bad, like having to repeat themselves. So it would be really helpful to be in one spot.
Yeah.
However it ends up looking.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of work that the county's doing around anti-distraction and anti-drunk driving programs. So yeah, being able to kind of report on that and have that be there's one source for everyone to be able to draw from, I think, save a lot of requests from them. So it's a great idea too.
So we need to have that while we're doing our funding cycle too. Then from June to August, health data.
Exactly.
Being facetious, but not. But
No.
2 years from now, whenever the update is for that funding cycle too.
Yeah.
Prioritize. Any other feedback or questions from the gallery? Oh, not. Okay. Thanks so much, Anna.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, item 5, updates, round table discussion. I can't think of anything that I have right now, this moment, but let's go this direction if anybody. Nothing for
I'm going to City of Roanoke Park's groundbreaking for the Crane Creek Trail tomorrow.
I got an email that said it was canceled. So, well, not the trail. Just the groundbreaking. Yeah, so I better check that again, but I looked at it 2 or 3 times and it says canceled. So maybe it's postponed, but.
I retract that.
So, or just show up at beautiful Crane Creek tomorrow morning and, I'm sure it will be lovely. And as always, I love that park. Yes, I mean, you'd think that we had gone out, right? I just saw it from our assistant, so.
So I look forward to continued construction that Park is doing on the trail connecting to Crane Creek Regional Park, which is underway.
Yes. Anyone else have anything to share? Going around.
We have, we're applying to the most recent round of the SS4A funding, the federal funding. So we'll let you know how that goes, but we have a project that's in our ATP and a bunch of other documents, which is the entirety of Sebastopol Road, which is almost 3 miles. We need to do true corridor, multimodal planning, safety kind of analysis. In a bunch of documents, we have like, oh, we can do protected bike lanes, or we could do XYZ, but we've never done a corridor planning process, so we're applying for that. And then we're also applying for demonstration projects for all of West and Dutton between Sebastopol and Hearn. And that would be like a community-led traffic calming demonstration project with the intention that there would be some adjustments made, and then those treatments would just kind of stay in, like we just wouldn't take them out. And anyway, so we're working on that application. So some folks in this room will receive requests for letters of support this week. And then, yeah, we will let you know how that goes. I have no idea. Good vibes, please.
Good vibes. It's a hard application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did hear, we had some meetings with DOT, and then we have some like lobby groups that we work with. And the main piece of info that we heard is do not mention anything about vehicle capacity decreases. So no road diets. They love roundabouts. So that's interesting. But no road diets, no parking removal. Those can end up being part of what comes from the corridor planning, but in the application, you can't mention that. And then if that ends up being a suggestion that's in the corridor plan, we would not go for federal funding for implementation. We would try to go somewhere else, assuming that, you know, it's the same administration, same priorities, but yeah, we'll see. I think that's all I have though.
Thank you.
There's the smart train ribbon cutting June 13th.
Yeah, fun.
Are we heading for what?
The smart train.
The Windsor.
The Windsor one.
Connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Did SMART ever get an update on their federal funding for the trail extensions? Do we know? I haven't heard.
Smart online, just by chance, anybody smart on?
The last update I heard from Julianne was they didn't have any update on their pending federal grants.
Okay. TBD. All right, shared micro mobility updates. Yeah. Anything?
Yeah, I guess that's me. I don't have much of an update this month. We see the Redwood Bike Share program is probably over 90% deployed. I think there's just about 4 or 5 locations that are pending kind of approvals. And that includes the 2 junior college campuses, and I believe an additional location in Santa Rosa. There's been a number of new drop zones that have been added. So these are locations where there's existing bike parking and that have been geo-fenced within the app so that you can leave a bike there and end your trip. They're not necessarily rebalancing bikes to be available there, but this will kind of help test out whether there is a demand to have bikes available at some of these locations. I think that's the only update I have. There was a lot of engagement through Bike Month for the program, and
we had Mark Azevedo, the operational manager, come and do a little presentation to our BPAC. So I mean, a little bit of it we heard at the working group, but we're still surprised and happy that Alicia Park at the time last month was still the top hub for trip starts and ends. So that could mean a couple things, right? It could mean that maybe there's not enough hubs because everybody's got to start and stop from either this one or the ones in the surrounding area, which is Katati. But still, because there are 8 hubs in all of Rohnert Park and Cotati. It serves the community. It seems to serve the community well. It is lower income, lower socioeconomic area, plus density of housing. So there's that. Coupled with what we found out that Mark shared too, is that Rohnert Park does have the highest percentage of memberships that are equity memberships. So in that way, again, serving a community. So it's really interesting. He is densifying the network with drop zones. So we hope to see more data about that. And it sounds like Redwood Bike Share is also, Mark Azevedo is working with his developer on data that is more destination based. Where are people going? And what routes are they taking? So we know the little bit that he saw, interestingly, people are going from Alicia Park to Rayleigh's, which is like less than a mile away. So why? Don't know. And they are making their way to the west side. So Target and Costco, those appear to be destinations. Are they going over the overcrossing? The vehicular overcrossing at Rohnert Park Expressway? We want to know that too. So more to come. Ask Mark Azevedo if you want to know more information about what's going on with bike share in your town. Okay, anything else on shared micromobility? 5.3, update on SCTA loaner equipment replacement, and I'm looking at them.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, we currently have all our bike and ped counters out in the field. 2 for Copeland Creek. Those are the pyros. Those are kind of the body heat sensors, so not distinguishing between pedestrian bicycles. And I think those should be getting pulled sometime in the next week or 2. And then we also have our multi-mobile ones that are ped and bike counter distinguishing for on Adobe Creek in Petaluma. Along the Lakeville corridor for their Lakeville corridor study. We did have some unfortunate news that one of the pyro counters was stolen and has not been returned. So we kind of just counting that as a loss, unfortunately. So we're down to 4. We did put little air tag trackers in the mobile multis that are big enough. And once we get the pyros back, we'll see if we can squeeze an air tag in there. We heard that it's kind of too tight of a fit, but that would definitely help a lot in just if this comes up again, which hopefully it doesn't. But yes, so we're down to 4, two pyros and 2 mobile multis. And I think Alexander from Santa Rosa just got in touch. She's reserved them for the mobile multis for Range Avenue once those come back in. So yeah.
Where do you fence a bike?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like butter and eggs weekend. I think it was just, who knows, people looking to make some dollars, but if you can't access it, then what's the point? It's probably just, the speculation is in the river somewhere probably, so. Yeah, unfortunately.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, number 6, other business, comments, announcements. Paris.
Bike month is not over yet, almost. We're having a movie night Thursday night at our office on Humboldt. 4 shorts from the Bike Film Festival, so 7 o'clock. There'll be popcorn. It's free. And then the other thing I wanted to share when you were talking about all the stuff with DOT funding and all that stuff. And are any of you members of the League of American Bicyclists or get their policy updates? You do, okay. So they're, they've got lobbyists in DC, and so I'm getting regular updates that are kind of like behind the scenes, like, unofficial stuff about what they're hearing going on up on the hill, and so that might be something people are interested in, might want to track or get connected to.
Popcorn, Eris's Place Thursday night. Oh, popcorn, Eris's Place Thursday night. Alrighty, if nothing else, we'll adjourn.
Place here, I could look into that 3 p.m.